See, don't you feel more confident already after I fucked around for
I do.
all by design.
I'm going to be the best guest you've ever had.
This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're dropping a special episode to let you know about Howls from the Wreckage, an anthology of disaster horror. This new anthology of 20 short stories is set among world-threatening disasters with elements of the supernatural and the macabre. Here to tell us about it is returning champion Chelsea Pumpkins.
Here I am, representing.
Listeners will remember that Chelsea is a writer from Massachusetts who stays curious about all things macabre. When she's not reading, writing, or watching something spooky, you can find her hiking in the White Mountains with her husband and her sweet pit bull, Moose. You can read her stories in various horror anthologies and in Shortwave magazine. She's the editor of That's What I Call Horror, an anthology of 90s horror, and a co-host of the Cutthroat Queens podcast. Also with us today is Timaeus Bloom. Timaeus fancies himself a makeshift magus, eldritch underling, and shadowy specter who began writing way too late. He now types away in the most inopportune moments playing catch-up. Timaeus is proud to represent Black authors in speculative fiction. Welcome to the show, Chelsea and Timaeus.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm happy to be back.
Welcome back. I've got an icebreaker for you. You've each been bitten by a vampire, and the thirst for blood has become too great to ignore. What do you do? Timaeus, you're in the hot seat.
I will probably, a young conservatives meeting, potentially, might be the best place for me to go.
You don't think their blood would be too thin?
It might be too thin, but I would start there, and if it doesn't work out there, I would probably try another young conservatives meeting.
Okay. So you wouldn't walk out into the sun and destroy yourself. You would just channel that thirst.
Right.
Okay, Chelsea.
I'm wondering, do I get to imbibe and then also turn people? Will they turn, or am I just draining them all?
You can turn
Okay.
people.
I didn't ask about powers.
Yeah, so you need to ask follow-up questions, Tim. First rule.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would find a coven of people that I want to spend eternity with and make a deal with them.
That is a very interesting approach. I like that because most people think about the thirst or they worry about missing half the day, squirreled away in a crypt.
That doesn't bother me at all. I can sleep all day.
Few people think about the immortality aspect of it. That's fantastic. That's a great answer. As a backup question, just off the top of my head, thinking about the theme of this new anthology you're involved with, have you ever been involved in a natural disaster?
I have, yeah.
Have you?
Yeah. In 2011, Massachusetts, Western Mass specifically, got hit with a freak tornado.
Whoa.
And I happened to, that's where I grew up. And it was the summertime, so I was home from college, so I happened to be home at the time. Here in the Northeast, once in a while, we'll get like a tornado watch, but it never, ever comes to fruition. So I remember I was shopping, and I got a text from my mom, and she's like, there's a tornado watch. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm at Marshall.
Yeah, whatever, ma.
Yeah, then she called me back, and she's like, you need to leave. This is serious. And I was like, okay. And we're not used to this. I don't have the home I grew up in. We don't have a basement. So I went to my grandmother's house. My mom's rushing home from work, and that tornado went right over us, and it decimated parts of our neighborhoods. Our house was safe. We were safe. But my high school and stuff was totally wrecked.
That is awesome. How about you, Tim?
I don't think I've ever actually been involved in any natural disasters. I'm from Alabama, and, we get tornadoes and that sort of thing. But I actually myself personally have not been in one. So my story had to come from my imagination.
Yes, you took a very different tact with your disaster.
I did.
And I can't wait to dig into that.
Yeah.
I remember we got hit by Hurricane Gloria in 1985. I grew up in Connecticut. There was a patch of woods between us and our neighbor, and as the hurricane hit, the trees started to fall like dominoes. These huge trees were crashing down towards our house. Basically,
Wow.
the storm was advancing on us, and boom, 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 all these big trees were falling down. And right before the trees that would have like come through our roof got pulled down by the storm, the eye of the storm passed over
Oh, wow.
and then moved on. So we,
Wow, you got so lucky.
Wow.
yeah,
of
and
course.
I remember, you could see the tree trunks in the winter when all the leaves were down, and there was just a ton of trees that were at like 45-degree angles. So Tim, were you raised in Alabama, or have you moved around a bit?
Yeah, I was born, in Alabama. But yeah, I just sort of grew up sort of an oddball, and I was pretty much a sort of solitary kid, and pretty much a very weird kid to my family. So I kept myself entertained a lot by myself. I read it a lot, generally speaking, but I wasn't really connected to horror in general in the beginning, actually. I was sort of more coming from like a dark fantasy approach of things. I went to school for medieval history. So, I was a black guy in Alabama who liked medieval history. So a lot of times people didn't know what to do with me, nor did I know what to do with myself. And so, I always really liked sort of like to read medieval fiction and that sort of thing. And Howl's anthology before this one was Howls from the Dark Ages, which is a collection that is all medieval horror stories.
And you're like, finally, my time has come.
Yeah, yes, I have something to do.
It's Tim's time.
It's Tim time, baby. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I said. I think I probably typed that into the horror lit subreddit. It's Tim time, baby. And so they were just like, oh, well, I think, this place named Howls is putting out this anthology. And it had already come out. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. By the time I got there, the anthology was out already. So, I just had to read it. I couldn't submit or anything. And they were getting prepared for the new one. People were talking about it, and they were saying, to be part of it, you just have to write something. And so the first thing I wrote is actually what's in this anthology.
Wow. So on the one hand, you missed Tim time.
I did.
You totally blew it.
I did.
That is embarrassing. But you redeemed yourself because the first thing you wrote made it into this anthology.
I was even more terrified that I got into the anthology with the first thing I sort of put together.
Your bio is a little Lovecraftian, and your story has a nod to some mythos elements.
I want something that dealt with sort of general cosmic themes, I guess, or sort of weird themes. I tasked myself, I had a mentor actually for this, and I really wanted to read a lot of horror to sort of find out what interested me. I found that, weird fiction was generally where I really, really had the most fun and enjoyment.
I was impressed by your story. I can't believe this is the first thing you've written because there's a very strong voice. There's a very confident style throughout it that gave it a different tone to some of the other, natural disaster-based things. Chelsea, can you tell us about the inspiration for Howls from the Wreckage?
I will do my best. Yeah. So, unfortunately, Chris, well, not unfortunately, Chris.
Fortunately, Chris could not be here.
Good for him.
Yes. Papa O'Halloran is expecting his second child.
That's right.
Yes. So he wasn't able to make it today, but both of us are good friends with Chris. And I've worked with him on a number of other projects too. So hopefully I am doing him justice. So the way that the Howls anthologies have worked in the past is every year they'll kind of take a survey of like ideas. Howls exists on a Discord server. So anybody who's kind of a writer on the server will chime in with some anthology ideas.
Tell us about Howls is, because I always skip over it and I think it's worth mentioning.
Howl Society is an enormous open group of horror lovers. During the pandemic, when COVID first started, I think a lot of people were, stuck at home feeling all kinds of upsetting ways. And so a lot of people ended up joining this community, and it started as a weekly book club. at some point there became a writer side of the house as well. And this society is open to anybody. Anybody can join it. If you go to like howlsociety.com, you should be able to find all the information. But yeah, it's just a big group of horror lovers at its core. And like we really bonded as a community. We've made some like lifelong friendships there. Like we do like gift exchanges for the holidays. Like there's a lot of like critique swaps for writers. These people, a lot of us have become like real true friends over the years.
And in that time, you've started to release anthologies?
Yes. So I joined Howls right before the first anthology was released. I remember joining the Zoom release party, and I really didn't know many people at all. And I was just like, I'm getting on a Zoom with a bunch of strangers to celebrate a book I have no idea about. But yeah, the first anthology was Howls from Hell. A group of writers just decided to do that together, and they workshopped each other's stories, and everybody got published. And then they liked it. Second year, tried to do it again. So that was Howls from the Dark Ages that Tim was just talking about.
AKA Tim Time.
Tim time.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, we don't talk about
Tim Time.
Yeah, but if you know, you know.
So the difference with that one is the first Howls from Hell didn't have an official editor or anything. So second time around, 2 people decided to edit it, Solomon Force and P.L. McMillan. More people joined the workshop, which is great because you're getting more writing experience, you're getting more varied stories. There were a few invited authors as well. People like Haley Piper and Brian Evanson and Cody Goodfellow. So some invited authors and then some of the workshop participants. At that point, there were some rejections because there were so many people. So we're at a point now where it's an interesting combination of community, but like sometimes it can be a little sad at the end as well. From that experience, this year, people were hoping for other ways to participate because the workshop is a lot of work. Like you are writing your own story. And over the course of like 2 to 3-ish months, you're providing feedback for up to 9 other stories. And it's pretty intensive and the deadlines move quickly. Writers either joined a workshop or there was a second option added this year, and Tim could speak to this because it was a mentorship program. So you could do the workshop and or the mentorship program. I participated in the workshop. So we had first drafts of our story due by a certain time. You submit it, then 3 people critique you critique 3 people, and then you do that 2 more times.
So it behooves you to trash everyone else's stories. So Survivor
That's
style.
What I'm saying. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just went in and sabotaged everybody.
Nice.
Sorry, everybody. They were blind submissions as well, which is an interesting thing to point out. Chris and team did a really good job at trying to make it as fair as possible.
That's really interesting. Tim, can you tell us a bit about the mentorship program?
Sure. Not only did I join Howls late, by the time I joined, they were already the theme disaster horror was already there. And, I think by the time I joined, they were like, the workshop begins in 6 days. And so I was like, oh, well, and then I can't remember, but someone told me, there's a mentorship as well. There was like a Google survey or something to say, do you need a little bit of help, a lot of help, or barely any help? And I was just like, I assume I need a lot of help. So we'll see. And so, that happened, and they threw me with a mentor to me, who I believe has actually been on here, Carson Winter.
Hey, Carson.
Yeah. Carson Winter was my mentor, is my mentor, I suppose, just like I look at Chelsea as a mentor.
That's too sweet.
She's never heard me say that before. So, putting it in here now.
She's blushing.
Carson really sort of advocated the importance of seeing what's out there, He was like, I don't want this to be a survey of 20th century horror, but, I was sort of into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we did that. And so, of course, Carson is, on like sort of weird and sort of literary side of things. As he was sort of recommending me sort of stuff, and, I was reading short stories and that sort of stuff, I was like, well, why can't we have more of this Brian Evanson stuff? Or why can't I, read more Laird Barron or something? But I mean, I was probably very annoying, like, oh, mentor, I just read this Legati piece. I know you really like Legati. So what do you think? So I'm sure I was very annoying.
Oh my God. Are you kidding? Carson loves talking about that stuff. I'm sure he was not annoyed.
Senpai, notice me.
Yeah, very much of that.
Carson is also in the anthology too. His story is really fantastic.
Chelsea, can you give us a bit of an overview on your contribution to the anthology?
Sure. So I actually really, really struggled to get started on this. I had like a bunch of ideas, but none of them were like really inspiring me to get started. There was a point where I even like messaged the group because we had like a huge group chat, and I'm like, I don't know, I might just back out. Like maybe this theme isn't for me or whatever. You're like, no, 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 don't. So then I was like, all right, back to basics. I'm just gonna think, what is a disaster to me? And spoiler alert, if you're gonna read my story, so a disaster to me would be being separated from my pet in time of crisis.
So, Tim, there's a famous modern element of structure called Save the Cat. And if you want your protagonist to be likable, have them do something like save a cat. And so, Chelsea, you took that to heart?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like to correct her, going back to something you said. She says that, people were like, oh, no, 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 please stay. We want you to stay. But really, it was a bloodbath. And while they might have been saying, hey, please, please stay, they were probably thinking, oh, man, that's one more person we're going up against. So, I just want to put that in there.
It wasn't that, the workshop environment is not that competitive. Don't scare people away.
Sure.
But you'll note that Tim didn't have the guts to join the fray. He was over with Carson reading Legati and Laird Barron.
Too afraid of me.
He was smoking a pipe and sipping tea and flipping through literature.
The fire was crackling, it was a nice...
While the group chat melted down and the knives were out.
So plebeian, I said as I was in my corner.
As a scholar of medieval history, you knew when to stay behind the throne.
Oh, yeah, yes, of course, absolutely. I understand, that power is oftentimes best done in the shadows.
So, Chelsea, your story?
So that was my inspiration, and it really took off. So I really connected with that idea. So my story takes place during and after a tsunami. So it follows the main character. It starts with getting that alert text, that warning. The character gets separated from their pet in the process. Then we follow them to like a FEMA shelter, and then eventually home. And we find out if they get reunited or not. So I don't know. It's a bit of an emotional story. We had a couple of people in the workshop who were really, really mad at me. I gave all the content warnings. So if you're sensitive to any sort of content, there are content warnings in the back of the book. I made a few people cry.
The last third of the book is all content warnings for Chelsea. That's like 80 pages right there.
So there's actually like a signature page you have to sign where it's like, I waive
any right to sue Chelsea for emotional damages.
After reading those stories. But yeah, my story is called Forever Home, so I hope people like it.
I was impressed by the story. I could tell it came from a personal place. As a pet lover, I share that same fear, that same anxiety. When I lived on the west side, we were in the tsunami zone, like just barely. There was a hill nearby where you could run up that hill conceivably. If you got the warning in time, everything below it could conceivably get hit because we were 3 blocks from the beach at the time. And so we had a dog and cat carrier on like a dolly. And it's like, okay, if we get, an earthquake in California, which is frequent and imminent, there's going to be a tsunami. And then you're going to have to grab the pets, throw them in these carriers, and then just start booking up this hill. It was always sort of a fear I had in the back of my mind. And I think after Katrina is when we started to realize as a country that it's not just the natural disaster, it's the aftermath. It's the FEMA camps, like what happens when you displace so many people. The idea of people living in these temporary shelters being stranded and abandoned and underserved, or waiting to find out when they could go back and if their house was still there or condemned or if their pets were still there, became part of the anxiety surrounding natural disasters. So I thought that was a really well-chosen setting for your story.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I work in fire safety in my day job.
Wait, you're the fire marshal? You've got like a little yellow hard hat under your desk marshal that you put on, and you're like, all right.
And if I were, I would not admit it.
Oh, is it like an air marshal thing? You're a secret fire marshal? You can't tell people? Hey, Chelsea, we're going to
Yeah.
light some Post-it notes on fire in the break room. You want to come?
I'm an undercover fire marshal.
Chelsea's a narc.
Anyway, so I work closely with the topic of fire. So to me, like you, Jeff, it's always in the back of my head, like, how am I getting my pets out? If you have 2 minutes max, what are you going to do? And I think, that's why you do things like drills, because there is a muscle memory to it. So the idea of getting caught off guard and panicking in the moment and trying to get out, like, that's really what I was trying to channel in like the first act of my story. So, there's a big sense of urgency for sure.
Cool. Tim, can you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah, sure. I'll try. For some reason, I just sort of had like the idea of like Brother Grime in my head, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, because I was thinking about sort of natural disasters, that sort of thing, and it wasn't really clicking for me. So I wanted to sort of take disasters, the concept of it, wrecks, and that sort of thing, and sort of deal with it a bit differently. I used to live in a place pretty much like the sort of area where a lot of it takes place at a small sort of barbecue place that's like in a pretty sort of gentrified area, that's it's being renewed and changed and sort of like put a nice coat of paint on and all that stuff. And so I wanted to sort of deal with that.
In your take on disaster, you're looking at a community that is gentrifying. It's like a slow motion disaster that is changing the streets, it's changing the houses, it's changing the businesses and the residents. It's almost like an invisible flood or tornado.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your protagonist goes into this barbecue place and everything has the patina of some down-home cooking and some good old boys.
Right.
There's a very funny detail you have where all the servers are wearing overalls and they all have the right shoulder strap down. And I could see it in my head so perfectly. That was such a well-observed note. I love antiques and architecture and history and things like that. And when I find out, oh no, the actual place burned down in the 1900s and then they rebuilt. Or this cool old bar, this is all like reclaimed wood from a barn in Maine.
Yeah.
This used to be a Fridays or something. You go into some kind of franchise restaurant. They have all these rusty tools on the wall and farm implements and license plates and signs. And it's all this quirky Americana. And it's all like fake rusted.
Right.
Yes.
I hate that. I hate
or
that.
Or you go to like a different chain and they have the
same exact thing. Yes.
Like,
And I hate fake authenticity.
Absolutely.
It just really gets under my skin. And so I found your story very compelling.
Thank you.
Why did you choose Brother Grime, and what is Brother Grime's message for the people?
I think Brother Grime's message is certainly improvement. Change is sort of in the eye of the beholder, really. Sort of regeneration. And, what might be better for you might not be the same or better for, certain other people who are living in a different way of life. And so, I didn't necessarily go out to sort of push forward this sort of particular message or anything. I think I'm far too new to advocate pushing something like that. But, I really wanted to sort of, one thing that really stuck out with me was, the whole concept of write from your own perspective and sort of write with things that you sort of noticed. And so I have sort of been, past those sort of gentrified communities or sort of outside of them. And I've seen people talk about, this place has, been purchased and it's going to be a new condominium and that sort of thing. I thought Grime was sort of the perfect vehicle.
Grime is a unhoused street preacher. He has a message of returning to the roots, but he's got a pretty extreme view on how to get back to basics.
Yes, Grime feels as though, there is this potential entity named the Grotesque that might be able to solve all of the community's problems.
What I like here is that you start with a surreal premise. Things are already askew with the gentrification and the fake authenticity. And then you overcorrect by bringing in the grotesque, which is undeniably human and natural, but not in a way that really meshes with living in a sane reality.
One thing I heard a lot was, it really stands out. I was like, oh, thank you.
That's something. That's something you got there.
Well, it's unique. And I was like, oh. So, no. And so, yeah. And so I had, when I got that email, I was incredibly shocked. I mean, I knew Carson liked it. Chris particularly was especially very sort of complimentary. And so I was really taken aback by it. That's not why I'm his friend now. It certainly helped, but no, but it was very nice to hear.
I have witnessed Chris gush over your story. He loves it.
Chris is a very sharp eye for material. I think he was, a good choice as the editor for this anthology. And Carson, of course, is a co-editor for Cosmic Horror Monthly. And he and I had a conversation about what he looks for in stories and sort of the new weird. It's not Victorian or Edwardian gentlemen in peacoats with pipes investigating, something down by the docks. It's really this modern day sort of Michael Shea style gritty cosmic horror. And I think you delivered that really well, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I just, a lot of that sort of old stuff, which, I do enjoy. I guess sort of Blood being the most famous. A lot of that stuff is rather academically tinged, and it has a protagonist who's usually generally the same. And that's not what really appealed to me. Like you said, like the Michael Shea stuff, yeah, just sort of taking these things and making it a bit more true to how I see life, I suppose.
Street level.
Life sort of, street level.
Brother Grimes comes from the street, so perfect.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Tim, what were some of your favorite stories from the anthology?
I don't know if you read Caleb Stevens' story.
Of course, past guest, Caleb, friend of the show.
Friend of the show, past guest, first time, long time, Caleb Stevens. Yeah. His story, I believe it's called The Song of Yokozoro, is just fantastic. It sort of deals with, obviously kaiju and sort of like destruction, but it's also very sort of close and emotional story about, a father and son feeling disconnected from each other. That one was fantastic. Chelsea's, of course, was great. But, she's had her 5 minutes. But it was a fantastic story. TJ's is really good, as Chelsea said, but Ryan is actually very good too. I really like, there's a lot of different stories in it, just sort of written differently. And Ryan's is a really good one as well.
Ryan Marie Ketterer.
Yeah, and P.L. McMillan's story about sort of like an Amazon-esque company.
P.L. is a sci-fi writer as well as a horror writer, and she really knocked it out of the park with her story Execute Release about what happens when you push an update that makes your delivery drones target your rival's delivery drones in a way that was actually believable. I mean, it's not that far-fetched. I don't know if you guys have those little delivery robots in town that take food down the sidewalk and stuff.
No, I've seen them all over the internet, but I've never seen one, actually. I would think I would just sort of lose my mind if I saw it.
I get excited every time I see them, but I also, watch these little wheeled robots trying to get over cracks in the shitty sidewalk. And I think someone ordered some seafood and they're going to be in a world of hurt when their hot, stinky seafood eventually gets there out of this robot.
Oh my gosh.
The future is right around the corner.
Yeah. I think Solomon Force also had like a technological disaster.
Solomon Force had a story called Crickets, which was just hit the nail on the head with a parent who's also a teacher and gets this overview on this Tamagotchi style Beanie Baby craze sweeping through the classroom. I was really impressed by the slow creeping horror of this technological fad, which the adults first dismissed and then acquiesced to, because they're like, all right, these kids are going to freak out if we take away their little devices. And it takes off from there. It is a really well-built, creepy story. So, Chelsea, can you tell us a bit about how this project came together in terms of layout, artwork, things like that, and then the different perks that people can get with the Kickstarter?
We had a ton of artists involved. Every story is illustrated. The interior art was done by P.L. McMillan, Molly Halstead, Cassie Daly, Christy Nogle, Michelle Tang, and Solomon Force. I also believe that some of the author portraits were done by some cover artists as well. So that includes Maya Weir. Yeah, Maya Weir, Schism, and Joe Radkins.
Christy Nogle, who I believe has also
friend of the show, past guest,
friend of the show,
first time.
That's right.
Long time, first time. Christy Nogle.
Long time, first time.
Yeah, so tons of people were involved with making it happen. Molly Halstead, who I just mentioned as an artist, also does all the formatting, and major kudos to her, because there are 5 editions of this book. So there's an audiobook, an ebook, a standard paperback copy that cover is this really cool neon look that's done by Maya Weir. There's a hardcover special edition the cover of that was drawn by Schism, and it's gorgeous. And then there is also, what's really cool is like a mass market paperback version. That art was illustrated by Joe Radkins, and that really nails the like old school, like 80s pulp vibe of the cover. The Kickstarter rewards have like all sorts of combinations of these, but you can get like different combinations if you like want 1 copy or all 3 copies or a couple of them. One perk that I find is super attractive: for $10, you can get the ebook and the audiobook. And I'm like, you can't get an audiobook for $10 anyway.
No, you cannot. That's incredible.
It's definitely been high intensity behind the scenes trying to, put these rewards together and get the word out and promo it. I'm kind of helping out with the social media stuff, given that our editor is at the hospital.
I've been saying, how long is that excuse going to last?
I know, Chris.
Well, he's in Canada, so he's probably got paternity leave. Like, he's going to milk it.
Absolutely. I don't blame him.
So lame.
I feel like Chris needs to get his priorities straight.
A human baby and a book baby, which is cool.
The stork brings human babies.
Oh, my mistake.
All he needs to do is sit back and smoke his little new father cigars. But a book baby, I mean, that takes time. That takes effort.
Takes a lot of work.
I have been saying this ever since the topic of him not being here because of this has come up. I was sort of chastised and I felt bad for saying it, but thank you for agreeing with me. I see no reason why our fearless leader can't be here right now. I don't get it.
I got your back, Tim.
Thank you.
We have some like bonus perks. There's a couple stickers that look really, really cool. There are some combinations where you can get the previous anthologies with
all certified Tim free.
That's right. All certified Tim approved.
Just the first 2. Tim is in the last one.
Hey, this is a rocket ship, baby. You better get on because we're blasting off. So, line up.
It's all Tim time after this.
That's right.
Great. So I think we've got the word out. People have their marching orders. I'll include links. So get out there, start clicking, start supporting Howls from the Wreckage.
Yes, your support means everything.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to see indie creators collaborating and mentoring and building something together.
Yeah, I can definitely say that it's really changed my life in a way. I mean, I'm not having a baby. I'm having a book baby.
Having a story baby.
That's right. I'm having a story baby. I've really met some cool people here who I think are true friends, and writing and talking about it, and just sort of a space to talk about, what we're reading. It's been very fun.
Where can our listeners find more of your stuff?
The best landing page is chelseapumpkins.com, but I try to keep my Twitter and Instagram up to date with what I'm working on as well. So I'm Chelsea Pumpkins on both of those platforms. If you aren't tired of listening to my voice, I'm also a co-host of another podcast, Cutthroat Queens, where we talk indie horror as well.
And Tim?
You can find me on Twitter at _Icker. Or if you're old school, you can take a bowl of goat's blood, pour it out, say the appropriate incantations, and hopefully you should be able to find it.
Once Twitter goes down, I think Goat Blood is going to be where everyone goes. It's like, are we going to Mastodon? Are we going to Hive? But I think Goat's Blood is going to be the social network of the future.
Get in early.
Tim time, baby.
That's right.
Say the words Tim time in the mirror thrice.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining me. I'm excited to get the word out.
Thank you for having us.
This was a blast.
Thank you.
Thank God Chris wasn't here.
I agree.
I know. You really would have brought down the 5, I think.
Yeah.
Go hang out with your human baby.
We love Chris. He's done an amazing job editing.
He has.
Deserves so much credit for getting through this process. He is the biggest lover of all the stories in here. He really does treat them like a little gaggle of children.
All right, Chris. We love you, Chris.
We love you, Chris.
We love you, Chris.
Subscribe and follow the show. Links are in the show notes. You can find Ryan at 20th Century RG with the number 20 on YouTube. And you can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.